Okay, apparently it's going to be a 3-part recording. That's great. We're back. So me, I've got one X chromosome. All right, that means I only have one set of instructions for all the genes encoded on the X chromosome. Okay? But I function. All right? My blood pumps, I move, I live, I laugh, I love, I experience all the joy that life has to offer. All right? So clearly you don't need 2 sets of the instructions, right? So sometimes what will happen is one of the X chromosomes will just get inactivated. It just gets condensed into this thing called a bar body. All right? And therefore, you only expressed a set of genes on one of the X chromosomes. Now, this inactivation, all right, it sort of occurs during embryogenesis, and it means that in an XX individual, one X chromosome can be expressed in part of your body, and a different X chromosome can be expressed in a different part of your body. So this leads to an individual that is a mosaic for that character, where it's literally like my elbow is expressing one X chromosome, my maternal X chromosome, and this elbow is expressing my paternal X chromosome, right? So if you see things like in cats, tortoiseshell coloration, okay, it's because some patches of skin have inactivated the X chromosome that encoded for black fur, and therefore they encode orange fur. Whereas in other patches of the skin, the chromosome that encodes orange fur has been inactivated, and the chromosome for black fur remains active. All right? So this cat here is a mosaic for the phenotype of fur coloration because that gene is on the X chromosome, and one of those X chromosomes needs to be inactivated. Otherwise, you end up with excess gene product. It's very complicated. It's regulated a little bit. And so you can get like things like in XX individuals, a patch of skin that has hyperhidrosis. And you sweat a lot right here, but no place else. All right? Because of X chromosome inactivation. It's fascinating. I got one question here, and I'll come back to yours. Yes?
Is that why most calicos are female?
You nailed it. Points. Yep, absolutely. Same question?
Exact same thing, yeah.
Yep, so you've heard that around the water cooler where we all hang out and talk about cats. All right, and this is why.
I have addition to that. So I know that on the other end of that, most orange cats are males. Is that?
I've heard that too, and I'm not positive about the veracity of that.
Okay.
You know, that's one where I'm like, I think that might be an urban legend, but I'm not sure.
Orange cats that I know are boys.
Yeah.
I don't know that many, but
I don't know that many orange cats. I mean, I know Garfield and Heathcliff. Those are the 2 orange cats I know.
like my family members.
Your family members are cats.
Family members have cats. Orange cats are all boys.
I understand. You're not half cat.
No.
No,
unfortunately.
okay, I'm so sorry. Very good. We had an additional question or hand up? No? All right. We're doing great, folks. We're doing great. Okay, there's very little left that we have not spoken about that's still on the exam. We have to talk about aneuploidy. I'm just checking okay, the exam real quick. Did I not talk about that? Are you sure about that? Wow. Okay. I didn't actually put a question about this, I don't think. So we're good. We'll do this real fast, and I won't stress too much about it. Okie doke. Here. Sometimes there can be large-scale alterations to chromosomes. One of the biggest ones is non-disjunction. Okay? In non-disjunction, either the homologous chromosomes don't separate in anaphase 1, or the sister chromatids don't separate in anaphase 2. And if this happens, you end up with gametes that have one extra or one fewer chromosome. Then when fertilization happens, you end up with a zygote that has one extra or one fewer chromosome. This leads to aneuploidy, or an abnormal chromosome number. It's different from polyploidy, where the entire set is replicated. Okay, aneuploidy. All right, these are the ways that it can happen. Aneuploidy results when two gametes formed, when a gamete that had a non-disjunction event during its formation fuses with another gamete. Monosomy means that you usually have two copies and now you got one. Trisomy means that you usually have two copies and now you have three. The aneuploidy is usually not viable, meaning that individuals with aneuploidy usually don't develop past early stages. Like zygote might divide a couple of times, but then it'll be like, nah, we can't keep going. All right. Polyploidy, on the other hand, is when the entire set of chromosomes gets replicated. So triploids, tetraploids, polyploidy happens a lot in plants, but not in animals. Okay? And polyploids, in plants at least, they tend to be more normal in appearance than aneuploids because they aren't imbalanced in the products of a single gene. Rather, they just have more of every gene product. You see why that would, shockingly, it's a larger alteration because then you got an entire new set, but it's, it might have a smaller impact on the phenotype. Okay. There's one viable autosomal aneuploidy in humans. So I threw a lot of words out there that hopefully, that I'll make sense right now. Remember, autosomes, all right, are the chromosomes that are not X or Y, all right? So the non-sex chromosomes are the autosomes. So aneuploidy in any of the autosomes except for the chromosome 21 does not lead to a viable offspring, an offspring that can be born. Okay? However, having 3 copies of chromosome 21, you develop Down syndrome. All right? You're still viable offspring. Okay? So why is it that chromosome 21 is still viable? Well, think about our chromosome numbering system. Chromosome 21 is the second smallest chromosome of all the chromosomes. All right? So it kind of makes sense that trisomy might be viable. So this is the viable aneuploidy in humans. There are other viable aneuploidies in humans that have to do with the X and Y chromosomes. All right? That can happen too. And you can have humans that grow up and live. All right? So there's all sorts of names. There's syndromes here, like Klinefelter syndrome, okay, where you have an extra X chromosome. There's monosomy X, which is called Turner syndrome. And these usually result in sterile offspring. There used to be this thing. You can also get an XYY individual, which at least when I was a student, they still called it super male, because you have 2 Y chromosomes. And there were all of these theories going around that XYY individuals were especially aggressive because they had an extra Y chromosome. And it was all founded on, there's nothing more harmful than somebody who's really confident and has a little bit of knowledge, Because they'll be like, well, I know this one thing, so I'm going to just apply it to everything, and I'm right, and I got this. And they're like, well, Y chromosome in boy aggressive, more Y chromosome, more aggressive boy. Sounds like a dumb idiot to me, all right? So try not to take the information you get in biology class and ignore that there's probably more complicated stuff happening. Because then, you go out there and you start incarcerating people because of their genotypes. And that's kind of what happened a few times. So let's not do that, all right? Cool. There's also DNA that's not in the chromosomes. You know about it. It's in the mitochondria. It's in the chloroplasts. Extranuclear DNA, we call it. All right? That's going to make inheritance patterns complicated, too. because extranuclear DNA, it all gets inherited through the egg, all right? So the egg gamete has all the mitochondria in it. Egg gamete has all the chloroplasts in it. So that's another thing you can blame on your maternal side. If you've got a mitochondrial disorder, just call up your ma. Say, this is all because of you, mother. I'm so tired all the time. It must be my mitochondria. All right. Here's this cool international controversy thing. This was, fresh and new back when I was a student, where this person had a mitochondrial disorder, right? The maternal side, all right? Her egg cell was going to pass that mitochondrial disorder on to any offspring that she had. So the two looked to science and in vitro fertilization to get around this. They still wanted their offspring to have a mix of their DNA and to be their biological offspring. So what do? Well, they got a donor, an egg donor, and pulled the nucleus out of that egg cell and jammed in the nucleus of the mother here, right? So now the sperm operates normally, but all the mitochondria came from the donor, and therefore there's no mitochondrial disorder in the offspring. The embryo gets implanted into the mother, gives birth to the child, and now the child's nuclear genome is a mix of the maternal and paternal sides, but the mitochondrial genome is entirely from this donor person. And this became an entire controversy of, I want to see this child. I'm also a parent. Their mitochondria are mine. I still donated the egg. Once again, confident people with a little bit of information, all right? Makes you unable to see nuance in these situations, leads to people with, very strict demands. Anyway, super cool story. I mean, not a super cool story, because there ends up being like lawsuits and all sorts of horrible things that happen. Great. Oh my gosh. You know what's really important? Natural selection and evolution. I got 7 minutes, and I'm going to push this all the way to the 7-minute mark. Okay? Let's talk about it. This is ridiculous that in Bio 105 we only talk about this for 7 minutes. But there's an evolution course. The genetics course talks about this stuff. You'll have other courses where you can talk about this. Evolution is a cool course if you want to learn about all this stuff. And you can take it as a non-major. It's got an online option. The instructor seems cool. I never took a class of his, but he seems like a good guy. All right? Anyways, Darwin goes out and sees some stuff. He's like, Her Majesty's ship the Beagle, right? We need a naturalist out there, somebody to catalog what is there in our empire. His job is write down all the things you see, because someday we might want to go back and take it, all right? Now, he's a little more scientific than that and spends a lot more time theorizing about how did all this variety come about, But many naturalists are like, if I put that in my mouth, it makes me feel good. Let's cut it all down and take it back to England. Maybe I'm biased. That's fine. We're all biased in our own ways, right? Darwin decides, I'm going to derive some conclusions that'll change the world. Conclusions not about we own that, but conclusions about where'd all this variety come from, okay? He sees that there's all these inherited traits. Everybody knew already that, hey, offspring tend to look like parents. It's good to keep that in mind. People have been breeding plants and animals for thousands of years already, okay? There was no, he didn't figure out that you inherited things from your parents, okay? But he started to understand how could this lead to the variety we see around us, okay? The variability you see around us. So he says, all right, there are individuals that have heritable traits that survive and reproduce at a higher rate than other individuals. Bless you. And there is one question on your final about natural selection, so catch this stuff real quick, all right? There are individuals with heritable traits. They survive and reproduce at a higher rate than other individuals. Okay? Natural selection can cause genotypes that are better suited to the environment to become more prevalent. If an environment changes over time, all right, the population keeps adapting to its environment through survival, and it keeps the population adapted to the conditions. Okay? Individuals don't evolve, populations evolve. Individuals can acclimate to their surroundings, but populations adapt and populations evolve. Okay? Natural selection can only affect characteristics that are heritable and that vary in the population. If every individual in the population is identical, natural selection can't select for any difference because there's no difference. All right? Yes. Man. Oh, you got so close. We got so close. Okay. There's a lot of evidence to support evolution. All right? What is evolution? Evolution is a change in allele frequencies over time. What is natural selection? Natural selection is when individuals in the population survive at higher or lower rates because of the environment. Nature selects for certain genotypes. Evolution is any change in allele frequencies. There's a lot of observations to support evolution exists. You start spraying poison on mosquitoes, you spray DDT on them, and over time, the population becomes more and more resistant to the poison. All right? Direct observation indicating evolution, really a natural selection sort of process, even though the poison being sprayed is done by humans. So you might call it artificial selection, where nature's not doing the selecting. There's an artificial selection where we are selecting for DDT-resistant mosquitoes. Usually we consider artificial selection to be when we select for something that we like rather than something that lets the organism survive better, like making fruits more palatable, making cows make more milk, etc. All right? Natural selection, genetic drift, gene flow. These are all things that can lead to changes in allele frequencies. Anything that changes allele frequencies necessarily causes the population to evolve because that is the definition of evolution. So evolution is an umbrella term, all right? There are many processes, many mechanisms that can lead to evolution. Evolution is just a change in allele frequencies, but natural selection, genetic drift, gene flow can all lead to changes in allele frequencies. Genetic drift is random, all right? It's a random process. So sometimes you got a bunch of beetles that are over here and a bunch of beetles that are here, and all the purple beetles are over here, and a tree falls and kills all the purple beetles. Now there's no purple alleles in the population. That wasn't because purple was less selected, was like worse for survival. It was pure chance. Genetic drift, okay? Randomness, stochasticity, which is a word for randomness. All right, founder effect. All the purple beetles got onto a little raft and floated off to an island. That population on that island now has a bunch of purple genes. They were all purple beetles. There's a bunch of purple genes out there, okay? Flat population, generation after generation. Boom, everything's purple. Cool? Good deal. Includes polydactyly, all right? The population on the East Coast that still has a pretty high rate of polydactyly, which is when you have an extra finger, because it was founded by a population of people that had extra fingers, pretty prevalent. So the genotypes for that ended up being more prevalent in the population. Look it up, it's cool. Bottleneck event, all right? Bottleneck event shrinks a population size down. So it could be a disaster that maybe doesn't select for things because they're better suited to the environment, but filters out certain alleles, all right? Changes the allele frequency. Look, the original population had some yellow alleles, and it had a pretty even spread of white and blue alleles. Then there's a bottlenecking event that just kills a bunch of the population. The surviving population can repopulate, but they only have blue and white alleles to work with, and the white alleles are at a lower frequency. Therefore, you're going to have a shift in allele frequencies here, meaning It's still evolution. Evolution does not always create offspring that are better suited to their environment. That's natural selection, which is one mechanism of evolution. Don't worry about it. Next one, sexual selection. All right? If there's a characteristic that makes you more likely to mate, that's sexual selection. If you're more likely to mate and produce offspring, you're more likely to contribute the alleles that you have to the next generation. So the population keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger antlers because the individuals with big antlers have big antler genes, they've got big antler energy, and they're going to pass that on to the next generation. All right? So those big antlers aren't actually beneficial for survival, but they're beneficial for reproduction. So that's sexual selection. There's a theory that there's a species of elk that used to exist. Their antlers got so big they couldn't move through the forest and they went extinct because sexual selection ran rampant. That should indicate for you that sexual selection and natural selection are not necessarily the same thing. All right? Hey, there's intrasexual, intersexual selection. Intersexual selection is when one individual from one sex selects for the individuals of the other sex, and therefore their preferences lead to elaborations of the characteristics that lead to breeding. There's intrasexual selection, usually has to do with competition. You keep getting the gorillas to be stronger and bigger and more aggressive because the bigger and stronger and more aggressive gorilla gets to mate. All right, that's intrasexual selection within that sex, as opposed to inter, between the two sexes, sexual selection. All right, where usually the female mating preference determines male characteristics. Okay, end of material. We did it, people. All right, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, so we only went 4 minutes over, but I was really hoping to have time to review some of the, lecture stuff. Go through the study guide. Go through the PowerPoint. All right. We covered that. We covered that. Yeah, you know what? We did technically cover everything, so that's solid. Yeah, there's a good number of questions here about probability rules and about predicting ratios of offspring of given genotypes or phenotypes. So really give that some attention because you want to get those questions right. But the study guide tells you everything you need to know. Okay, that's it. We'll be back at 1 p.m., okay? And then we're going to do your lab final exam. All right, it'll be that time. Have a good lunch, everybody. If you can, get yourself an extra snack for during the lab final. And take a break if you get burned out in the middle of it. All right. Thank you for watching this recording. Goodbye.